Hello, everybody, and welcome Karishma Dube, who is the latest Student Oscar Award winner for her latest film, Bittu. So, welcome, Karishma.
Thank you so much.
Karishma, first of all, congratulations for becoming the recipient of the prestigious Student Academy Award winner. So, what was the first reaction when you heard about this news?
Um, it was quite funny. It's a funny story because I knew I was a finalist for a couple of weeks, and they asked us to, they scheduled a Zoom interview like this one morning at like 7:30 a.m. So I come on the call and they asked me a few questions, and then they made a surprise announcement in the middle of the interview. I thought I was just going to be answering some questions, but they had Spike Lee, the filmmaker, kind of surprise us on the Zoom call and give me the news that we'd won the silver medal. And I was, to be honest, in the beginning for the first hour, I was a little bit numb. I couldn't. I was a little shocked because it's a very short list of people who I really admire a lot who have won this award previously, and it felt very, it felt quite amazing to represent my country and my school on that platform. So it's been pretty surreal since then, but I feel very grateful. My first reaction was definitely shock and numbness.
Yeah. Karishma, can you just tell me the plot of the film, your short film, Bittu?
Yeah, Bittu is inspired by the government school poisoning that happened in Bihar in 2013. But, the film at its heart is about a friendship between two very close friends. And their friendship is tested on this very seemingly normal day in school. And it just happens to be the day this poisoning occurred. I wanted to make a film that recreates the event. I wanted to cover a lot of thematic things that were similar to this tragedy, but I didn't want to make like a social documentation of what happened, how did it happen, why did it happen. What stuck with me through the script to the end, final cut, was the character of this little girl Bittu, who was kind of very much ahead of her years and unaware of traditional gender norms in our country. Was very original, kind of like a big person trapped in a small body, and how her individuality is tested on this day. So the film is more about friendship and what it means to be a child in our world today, rather than the tragedy itself. But it speaks to a lot of themes that happen on that horrible day in 2013.
Yeah. You talked about the individuality of the character Bittu, and also there is a contrast in the her friend Chand. So
Yeah.
why the contrast was chosen?
I for many, like for a couple of months, I wrote the film and didn't feel like it was working for me because this girl was very smart and original, but she kept being like a mufat after every 10 minutes, and it wasn't having the same effect as, if you have a character that contrasts this person. I was a very shy child in school, and I had moments of being very loud and boisterous, and I was also bullied, but also the bully very often. So I kind of put both of my different natures into these two people and try to examine how they kind of feed off of each other. For Bittu, I think she was coming to school mainly because she wanted to be around her friends. She was coming for her free lunch. She had a special relationship with the teacher, but these interpersonal relationships was what was important to her. She didn't walk around the world thinking I'm better or different from my shy friend John. But as the audience, we kind of see that difference, and we see how these two different people are treated in the world, how they're accepted by figures of authority, by their own peers. Bittu is bullied for having a mind of her own. Chand is, a lot more cuter in a traditional way. She's easily accepted by teachers, even if she makes a mistake. It was something I kind of observed a lot when I was in school, in boarding school, kind of in the same area where we shot the film. So I think it just felt like both their qualities would be accentuated if I put them together, and they were so different. I could talk a lot more about my own complicated relationship with authority if you can see how they behave with two very different kinds of people. Like in school, I always felt like the very academic kids who always did well in class, they were glorified by the teachers, they were pushed ahead, they were encouraged, they were put on a stage, clapped for. The more difficult children who were harder to understand, they were just kind of ignored or punished. Like, I think, in my opinion, I'm not a teacher, but I've been most helped by people who took the effort to understand me when I was not behaving a certain way that felt like it was acceptable. I think that's truly the value of education. If you can find a way to reach a child that is, expressing anger or confusion, because children have very different outlets of expressing very complicated feelings. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about, children's relationship with authority in my country. It felt appropriate to have these two friends be very different from each other.
Yeah, Karishma, you talked about the relationship of the children with the authority. So there is an authority called the headmaster and headmistress, and she has a different approach towards the children. She doesn't want to listen to anybody, and she just wants to sit. And there is another character, Bittu, who doesn't want to listen to anybody, and she wants to express herself. So why such contrast was shown, and what is your purpose of doing it?
I, you know, I always um, I always had a hard time when someone told me that you can't do this and but like, we're not going to talk about it anymore. Like, there was no conversation with children. There's no, you know, I have a little bit of resentment for authority where you can't speak against, like, just basically like they've already decided this is the way it goes and they don't want to talk about it anymore. And I think that's a very common thing in India, at least for me in my life growing up. I felt like just because we were younger, we didn't know better, or just because you are older, you know everything. And that comes in not only just with age, but it's a quality that comes into class as well, and caste also very often. Like, this whole tragedy. I preserved very few things from the real incident. One of them was the fact that the cook had already told the headmistress that something smelled bad and there was something fishy in the food, but she was, the headmistress was coming from a place of ego, so she did not want to even have a conversation. Maybe if she had listened, these children would still be alive today. So I think there's a lot of power and ego involved, that that sometimes results in a lot of unnecessary tragedy, unnecessary problems, a lot of humiliation for the person on the other side, which I think people carry. They don't know how to express at home. And as far as Bittu, I've never thought about it that Bittu came from the same position of sternness like the headmistress. But that's a great observation. I think subconsciously I felt like I wanted these teachers to meet their match uh, in Bittu. I wanted her to collide with them in a way that, like, if she was not being understood, she doesn't want to talk about it either. If you don't understand me, forget it. I don't want to apologize. I don't want to talk. I don't want to eat the food. You know what I mean? So I wanted them to kind of meet their match and for her to stand her ground. And for her, it's not coming from a place of ego or power. She's completely powerless in this world. I think it's coming from a place of resolve. Like, she knows she's right. She's being corrected for something that is not based in logic. It's just the way things are, and she just won't accept the way things are without questioning it. I think individuality in a child is very precious, and if we preserve it, we'll definitely have a better society than we do right now.
You talked about the conforming and non-conforming child. The Bittu as a child was non-conforming child. She wanted to express, but there is Chand who was always good and she always conformed. But what happened as a tragedy? Bittu survived and she expired in the incident. So, what is your view on it?
To be honest, when I watched the film in a dark room with people, and unfortunately, that's only happened once because of the pandemic. I felt really sick and empty at the end of the film because I had also like have such an affection for these children, and when I experienced the loss of Chand, I really experienced it as an audience member. I felt really a little bit angry at myself, like why did I do this or why did I write this? But I don't think Chand's life was lost because she was good and more agreeable with authority. I think, unfortunately, that's just how life is for some children in our country. Like, it's of no fault of their own that they have to experience so much death and violence. Violence can come in different ways. It can come in expressions of just abuse or in all sorts of kind of abuse. It doesn't have to be just emotional or physical, but they have to like experience and see too much in our country. I think like we don't really protect their formative minds in a more in a more careful way than it's done in some other places in the world. They see too much, and I think that gives them a quality of resilience which is really important and beautiful. But also it results in their loss of innocence, their loss of life in the most extreme cases. So I don't think Chand died because she was good. I think Bittu survived also through coincidence. I think it's a separate thing that she was um, confident or strong enough to hold her ground, but I don't think that's enough to save them from the kind of stuff that they experience. Because, to be honest, in my opinion at least, I think Bittu also died a little bit that day because no child, no 9-year-old child should experience loss so closely, and many of them do. You know.
Yeah. Karishma, this film doesn't seem to be about the incident or the accident, and who is responsible for that. It doesn't go into the fact finding, but it goes into the human relations, specifically the void created by the friendship of
Yeah.
Bittu and Chan. So, was it your focus on it?
Yeah, I was very strongly of the view that I didn't want to make a film. I'm very aware that a lot of like stories come out of India. It's a developing place. I hate to use that word also. It's a complicated place, where a lot of us, where everyone is very different from each other. A small mistake can lead to a very big tragedy very easily in a country like India, sometimes even because of a lack of accountability sometimes. I was very sure that I didn't want to make a film that indicted anyone. I didn't want to be like, this is the bad guy. But I didn't want to spare anyone either. I didn't want to show anyone in completely good light. I think all the characters needed to have a good and bad side because that's what life feels like, like I think the shopkeeper whose fault it was very naive. He was the dreamer, his life and focus was in a different place. So he made this stupid mistake. The headmistress was definitely coming from a place of ego and authority, but she didn't ever mean to kill anyone, you know. Or between their relationships as well. I think Chand and Bittu had a falling out in the film, but I think that was coming from very sensitive places in their hearts. I don't think they hated each other. They would have probably made up in a couple of hours. That's how children are. Or Bittu's relationship with the teacher. I think he was coming from a very earnest place. He's a young teacher who came into education very idealistically and wanted to do good and actually wanted to teach Bittu and did enjoy his relationship with her. But he was also tired and jaded by the same system that was, ignoring Bittu herself. So I was more interested in seeing how a human life is changed very suddenly because of things that are out of their control. I didn't want to make it investigative. I didn't want to understand why. I didn't understand the value in trying to unpack that mystery. I thought there was a lot more value to show that difficult things and bad things like this happen in places like India, but it's just a forgotten community. And these people have dreams, they have ambitions, and they love each other, and they're happy. They're not sad because of their lack of resources and socioeconomic position in the world. They might be somewhere in a mountain far away, but they're very happy with their lives. They're very fulfilled, and these horrible things can happen anywhere, even in beautiful places. You know.
Karishma, in the film, there is a color. There are two colors, contrasting colors: the red color and the blue color. And that ink that is used from the
Yeah.
classroom up to the end of the film. So, why you used this blue color or the ink in this film? Was this in?
Um, I think the use of the ink was also to show what sometimes these children don't have, like very simple things, like I think it was true for me also. Like we were allowed to use pens only at a certain age. It was a thing of adults. You can't wear a watch. You can only wear it when you're 16 or something. So I wanted to show that she was always reaching for things that was out of her reach. She wanted more from her life. The the stealing of the ink is a very small thing, but I think for me it symbolizes control and possession of things that are out of her life, out of her reach. um, but in terms of the color palette, I really wanted to have the place feel a little bit sick. um, like the place itself was a little bit gray and forgotten, like remote, that the government and the people, it's kind of kept away as a secret in the world. It's like in the forgotten side of the Himalayas, it's in the foothills before it gets really beautiful or anything. The red was, um, like I wanted the children to still fill up the frame more than the landscape itself. I wanted the eye to go to the children and for them to still signify some kind of electricity, happiness, and a sign of like, kinetic energy in this very dead space. But I can't take I'm very happy with the color palette. I had a lot of help from my sister, who was she was a cinematographer for this film, and we worked for the first time together on this movie, and she worked very hard to get the right lenses, and she worked with our colorist in Bombay, Mehak Gupta, who's amazing as well, to bring out this kind of desaturated color palette. My production designer Devika Dave was also excellent. We she came on board only a couple of days before. She came to set only a couple of days before we shot, and she did this beautiful job of looking at what already existed in this world and then bringing that into our film. We had a lot of options for the school uniforms. We picked our favorite one. We organized, one of the schools to give us a couple of extra ones of that, and clothed all the kids in that color. She was also very careful and specific about what exists in the background, where the frame should be in the location we had already found, to like to bring out this correlation of colors. So I had a lot of help, and it was just it was a collective effort. Yeah.
I recall when you talked about the frames, I recalled four frames prominently. The first was when she does the katti with her lady finger, and when Chand dies, at that time she puts the same lady finger in her hand and
Yeah.
looks beside her. So those two frames really fascinated me. So
Thank you. I know that was, I feel like children have their own shorthand with each other. We used to also live and die with our kattis and our appas or whatever. I think it's different in every state. I think those little gestures mean a lot to children. And for me, like, I was always like taught and trained to like think in images to try and push the story forward in images, use as little dialogue as possible. That's not how we live in India. We talk a lot, that we scream a lot with each other. We don't feel scared of excessive dialogue. So I didn't want to stray for that, but I also wanted to borrow some stuff that is more specific to Indian culture and children within Indian culture, and how we have our own hand gestures to symbolize friendship and fighting and making up and stuff like that. So that was something that existed in very early drafts and made it to the last draft. So I'm very happy that you noticed it and it stayed with you.
other two frames which I noticed. The first frame was the beginning of the film, where she is smiling and she is dancing before those. young boys. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end, first of all, in the beginning, she's very happy and she's ready to do anything for other people. At the last frame, where she is actually becoming rebellious, she wants to show the
Mm-hmm.
anger and show the rebellion. She throws that stone and shows the rebellion, and the last frame is showing the rebellion character of the character Bittu.
Yeah, I think the rebelliousness in her lived in from the beginning as well. I think the end for me, it was very important for me to feel her anger, or even if she was unable to save her friend or not, I had set up the character in a way that I was very sure that in the end of the film, I wanted people to end it with a sense of admiration for this child. And she was not just going to accept something lying down. She had to try to save her friend in some way or get help. And, because I think that's what Chan would have expected her to do as well. But the beginning was, it was not a part of the story in a real way, but it was important for me to establish that relationship with each other. Like they are, teacher and protege. Like Bittu is really smart outside of the classroom, even if Chand is smarter inside of the classroom. And Bittu is also a teacher to her, but also like her partner in crime in some way. um, and then also it was kind of inspired and based by, like, if you go on YouTube and you look for it, you'll see 100 videos like this where where people have filmed children performing sometimes folk songs and stuff. Sometimes it's like very disturbing Bollywood songs or like dirty jokes, because it's funny coming out of a child. um I shot the film in Uttarakhand, but the tragedy actually happened in Bihar, and the two main kids are actually Bihari. They're migrant laborers who live in Uttarakhand. So I wanted to bring a little bit of that culture as well, and I've grown to love Bhojpuri music now because I used it so much in the film. I think that culture is very interesting, but I also notice sometimes when they have like a mehfil or something in Bihar, they'll always have like a little boy singing these songs because it's funnier. It somehow diffuses the overt sexuality that's happening on stage. If I have a child sing it, which I think is kind of messed up as well. They don't think about what effect it may have on this child. Um, but somehow it still makes this material accessible for the public. And I think a lot of kids emulate that. We respond to Bollywood songs from a very young age. Even I did. Like we don't understand these feelings and relationships, but we're singing it and we're making the same expressions like we see on TV. So I wanted to kind of recreate that a little bit. uh, it's shot very closely because I wanted it to feel a little bit like how it feels like when you're there or you're filming someone with your phone in a messy way. But I also didn't want to shoot it with the kids and the men in the same place. Like I wanted to still protect the children during the shoot. I didn't want them to dance and sing for a bunch of men. So I shot the kids separately and I shot the men separately, and we just cheated the eye lines and stuff. So it was close for a reason, also technically, but emotionally as well. So I kind of like how it ended up initially. It was very hard to edit the beginning because I had a little bit of like, there was too much happening in the footage, but I kind of like how uh, the energy of the beginning is very different from the rest of the film. I think it works pretty well. Yeah.
Karishma, how you chose those characters? Because when I see the characters Bittu and Chan, they seem to be very realistic. Even the headmistress and the that maid also.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that, when I was making films in New York, I was still writing about Indian people, and a lot of them were not. It was not easy to cast them. It was not easy to hold auditions because I would never find the kind of person I was looking for. They always had an accent and stuff. So I just started street casting a lot. I made a film with my Masi in New York, and this other girl who kind of physically fit the role for my previous film. So I had a little bit of experience with working with first time performers, non-actors, and I really enjoyed it because I think if you can really find a place of truth, and like there's a this pure energy when they're doing it right. Especially with the kids in this film, I had written to specific kids. I wanted them to have a relationship with each other already. I wanted them to have a relationship with the place. So I knew very early on that I couldn't use actors. I wanted it to feel very authentic. I wanted everyone to feel like they actually are from this community. So the only professional actor was Saurabh Saraswat. He played the teacher. He was amazing. He was exactly what I needed to kind of lead this cast of non-actors into places and help me, like, in a very practical way, build these scenes with people who didn't understand what eyeline is and how many times we need to cover something and stuff. So he was very very strong in that way as well, besides his amazing performance. But the shopkeeper was, like, his name is Monu Onyal. He was he was a bartender in the local bar in Dehradun. I just loved his energy, and he had something very similar to what I had written. I had written a much older man, but I just casted him because he seemed perfect. The local, like, threading salon lady played the headmistress. I just loved her face. She was willing to do it. I just wanted people who wanted to act, and then try to figure out a way to make them act. And for each of them, it was a different process. The cook was, the domestic help of one of my aunts who lives there locally. She also had this, uh, it's, she had this, like, stillness in her. It was like she was almost sad, but I felt like her life had was surrounded to not speak up. So it was very hard for her to speak up and be loud. And I wanted the character to have that energy as well. She was very, I think she looked beautiful on camera, and she was really easy to work with eventually. The two kids were a little bit more challenging, and they are the first people I actually cast because I knew I needed time to work with them once I decided who's going to play the characters. So once we locked the location, I just started going to different communities along with my friend and very good actor, Nirvana Sahni. She's from Delhi. She was kind of like my, casting partner and acting coach on set. And we would just go and introduce ourselves to different communities and play, like, theater games with children. They had holidays they weren't in school. So, and at the same time, we were trying to cast in our head. And I think it was like the first week when I saw Rani Kumari, who played Bittu, and we just looked at each other and we had, like, an instant connection. And she was physically different from what I had written, but uh, there was this confidence in her. She was a leader. She came right out of, like, the little settlement where her family lives, and she was like, "What's up? You want to play?" Like, she was very like, she loved to perform. She was not scared or shy of an audience around her. So as the days went by, I just kept going back to the same place, and I was just more sure that she was the one. And from that point on, I started looking for a chance in her same community because I wanted them to know each other. I wanted that friendship to already exist. And we found her a couple of weeks after that. She was, Chand, her name is Renu. Renu was not going to school at that time, so she was lacking a little bit more in social skills. But eventually, she traveled so far from when we found her to the end of the shoot. She was a lot more confident. Her parents were very, very supportive and wonderful in getting her there. Once she knew she had that support, she just blossomed and opened up in front of the camera. I made them watch a lot of movies with children in it, and then I showed them the making of that movies to understand that children, like, that you have to stay quiet and not keep laughing. At least count till 10 and don't laugh, or this is what that emotion is and this emotion is. We didn't rehearse as much as just create memories and get to know each other, because at the end of it, it was just that relationship of trust that I had with the kids, that they kept going and going and going. I on set, it was more about working back to things that had already happened in rehearsal. So I was just like, when she was supposed to be angry or in the assembly scene, I'd already been to their school. I knew that the teacher had a difficult relationship with Rani already. So I said, so I would try to make her recall how it felt like to be spoken to by her own teacher. I was like, do you remember how angry you feel? Do you remember how scared you get? Like, you can do it like that. Or do you remember that boy who comes in and out and you make fun of him, tease him like this, So it was like, I was trying to reference things that already existed in their life. So it was more about making the script become real in their version of their world and their life than trying to make them learn, you know, learn learn how to behave like Bittu. The only difference I made, I try to work very hard to make them understand that you are Rani and Bittu is a fictional character, and you are Renu and Chand is a big fictional character. And what's happening to Bittu is not happening to you, and what Bittu likes, wants, knows, doesn't know is not what you like, want, and don't know. So that really helped. These kids were very smart, and honestly, uh, the most what's the word? Like, it was the most memorable and magical creative relationship I've had with any performer. It really, I'm very proud of their performances.
Karishma, what is your message to the budding filmmakers in India so that they can also make the quality films and they should also get the Oscar awards?
I'm still a budding filmmaker. I think I don't know what I'm doing half the time. The Oscar thing has been this beautiful thing of luck and magic, without not counting the hard work. I think it's very important to stay true to yourself, like to tell stories that you believe in, as opposed to what you think will work. I try to make films that are not. It's not like the whole film is not something that's happened to me, but everything that's happening in the film and to these characters and who they are is coming from something somewhere inside of me, something that's happened to me, something I've observed or people I've admired, or from a distance or from proximity with them. So I think to just make material that feels very personal to you in some way, it really gives you the confidence on set to do everything that you don't know how to do. You figure it out if you know the material is something very personal to you. I think it's also important to I have a very big support system of a lot of friends who also make films, but will help me, and I in turn help them to make films. So it's important to have a tribe. You need a team, because it's kind of very lonely and hard to make movies, especially short films, because you don't know what's going to happen, if it'll just disappear or find recognition in the world. So it keeps me going to know that I have friends alongside of me who are doing it, and my family is very supportive, even though very often they didn't understand what I was doing, but now they do. I think when other people enjoy your work, they start to understand a little bit more, but they always let me do what I wanted to do. And I think that's a privilege that a lot of people don't have. I'm very grateful for it. But even if you don't have that, I think if you find the friends and community that helps you make these movies, it's the most valuable thing.
Karishma, what are your next projects and plans?
I'm currently producing a feature film for my friend Mary Evangelista. They produced Bittu as well. They're my classmate from NYU. So I'm trying to, support that first move in their career. And it's been very educational also to find, to discover the stages of making a feature film. But for the last couple of weeks, a month or two, I've been trying to get back into writing. It was a hard year last year, so I had to work a lot more than write to just keep afloat. But now I'm working on like a series, like an 8-episode half-an-hour series based in New York, kind of based on my last few years over here, and talks a little bit about what it means to grow late in your life away from home and away from everything that you know, and still be very Indian in a very alien world. and I'm working also on a feature film that's based in Assam. It's where my mother's family is from. It's kind of inspired by my family events. I have a very big family of very amazing, strong, uh, memorable women, and I'm trying to write something that takes place over 3 days in our family home in Assam.
So thank you so much, Karishma, for coming over here and talking to us and guiding.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is mine. I enjoyed your questions so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.